You may have heard the story of the rabbi whose sermon passionately addressed humanity's powerlessness in the divine scheme. God is supreme, all-powerful, all-knowing, and we are nothing, the rabbi shouted. He continued, his voice trembling, Ich bin a gar nicht. I'm nothing. And the cantor was deeply moved by the rabbi's words. He stood up and cited, Ich bin ich a gar nicht. I also am nothing. The president stood up and said, Und ich bin a gar nicht. Me too, I'm a nothing. And suddenly a voice emerged from the back of the shul. A humble, a pashut yid stood up and said, Und ich bin a gar nicht. I'm also nothing. The chazan turned to the president and said, Zer wie meint, as is a gar nicht. Look who thinks he's a gar nicht. Look who thinks he's a nothing. It seems strange to aspire to be a gar nicht, to be a nobody, to be a nothing. Is there some truth to this joke? As we often say, younger people tend to say, can it be cool to be a gar nicht? To be a nothing, to be a nobody? Or is it something that we should avoid at all costs? So today we read, again, the Aseret HaDibrot, the Ten Commandments, and recalling a pivotal event, maybe the pivotal event in our spiritual history, Matan Torah, the revelation of Torah to the people at Sinai. And it's interesting, to say the least, that God chose to reveal the contents of Torah at Har Sinai, at Mount Sinai. Perhaps a more appropriate venue would have been a mountain in the land of Israel. And those of us who've been to Mount Sinai, I was a student in the 70s at Hebrew University, and we had a tiyul, we had a tour to Sinai, which then was in Israeli hands, and we climbed up Mount Sinai. It's a nebuch little mountain. It's like a hill. It's really small. It's not impressive when you see it. And they think that's the Mount Sinai. We're not even sure. But the rabbis deal with this in the Midrash. They say when God chose to give Torah to the Israelites, the mountains all appealed to God. They wanted to be the venue. They wanted to be the location. So Mount Carmel and Mount Tabor, they approach God. And Tabor says, the divine presence should rest on my mountain. Lifi shani gavoa mikol. I'm the highest of all the mountains. Not even of the waters of the flood overwhelmed me. And the other mountain says, I'm called Mount Carmel, and so the divine presence should rest upon me. And notwithstanding their solid qualifications, Mount Tabor and Mount Carmel received their rejection slips. Midrash continues, God says, because you're so arrogant, you think so highly of yourselves, you've made yourselves unworthy. God says, I want to dwell only on Sinai because it's the lowliest of all the mountains. It's a nebuch of a mountain. I dwell in the high and holy place, and also with one who is of contrite and lowly spirit. Midrash and other texts that we'll look at a bit later, countless others in the vast core of rabbinic literature, all suggest that God prefers the humble and abhors arrogance and conceit. No two ways about it. But that's not to say that we shouldn't feel good about ourselves, that we shouldn't have self-respect or sense of dignity. As Jews, we're deeply conscious of feeling pride in ourselves as Jews, in our achievements both as individuals and as a people. Earlier this summer, our Torah reading took us through the story of the 10 spies who were pessimistic regarding the Israelites' chances of conquering the land of Canaan, because in their view, hayinu k'chagavim, they were like measly grasshoppers in comparison to the tall, strong, and handsome Canaanites. Remember that the 10 spies, were punished for their lack of self-confidence, their lack of faith in themselves and in their own strength. Yes, positive image, we've always thought correctly, is important. We spend a lot of money on clothing, on cosmetics, on books, on courses, on analysts, all for the purpose of feeling good about ourselves. So how are we supposed to respond to this rabbinic perception of God as one who wants us constantly to feel humble and insignificant? The Talmud takes us in that direction, suggesting that God says to Israel, why do I love you? I love you because even when I bestow greatness upon you, you humble yourselves before me. I gave greatness to Avraham, and he said to me, Anochi afar va'efer, I'm dust and ashes. I bestowed greatness upon Moshe and Aaron, and they said, Nachnu ma, we're nothing. Other nations, not so. So why does God love us? Not because we're great, evidently. Not because we have far more Nobel laureates than people 10 times our size. Not because of the strength and successes we've achieved. That's not why God loves us, at least according to the Talmud. Why does he love us? Because following the example of Avraham, Moshe, and Aaron, we have not let our successes materially, professionally, intellectually, politically go to our heads. Meanwhile, kings and leaders of other nations, ancient times to this very moment, consider themselves omnipotent. And one by one, most have fallen, and sometimes tragically taking millions with them. But Abraham, Moses, and Aaron, they knew how to put greatness in perspective. Abraham was very wealthy, influential, in addition to being the preeminent religious innovator of all times. Not a bad curriculum vitae. So when Abraham, a standout human being, if there ever was one, in dialogue with God over the fate of the people of Sodom, says, Anochi afar va'efer, I am dust and ashes, God was impressed. Maybe that was why God let Abraham win the argument over Sodom. And Moshe and Aaron had secured the release of the Israelites from slavery. Their message to the people, Nachnu ma, what are we? We're mere messengers. It's God who effected your freedom. We're nothing. And Moshe doesn't even make it into the Haggadah of Pesach. But it is Moses who the Torah describes as Anav ma'od mikol adam asher al pnei adama. Very humble, the humblest person in the world. Moshe Rabbeinu, the eternal teacher of the descendants of Israel, our greatest leader, the humblest person in the world. God loves us, we are told, because we followed the example of Avraham, Moshe, and Aharon. We refuse to allow great achievement and success to change us. Think about it. Egomaniacs are not really lovable. In order to be loved, we have to put our success in context. We can have self-respect, we can like ourselves, we should like ourselves, but worship of the self is as dangerous and self-destructive as it is obnoxious. We have to keep in mind, as painful as sometimes it may be, we as human beings have limitations. Limitations that all of us, from the manual laborer to the PhD in biochemistry, share. We make mistakes. We don't always get it right, and sometimes far from it. Look, we don't have to go too far to realize the hurt in our lives, in our world. And many are hurt on an intimate level because of the breakdown of families and personal relationships. But such failure, as sad as it may be, relates to our humanity, to our inability to always make the right decision, to say the right thing, to do the right action, to be the person that ideally we wish we could be, to be the perfect husband, wife, son, daughter, parent, sister, brother, friend, to be able to succeed in every personal interaction. It's worth noting that virtually all of our biblical patriarchs and matriarchs had more than their share of failures on the personal front. Their marriages, their relationships with their children, the hatred between siblings, all would have been worthy grist for the late Jerry Springer and all the other avenues that seek to show our families and lives at their worst. So right from the top down, the Torah makes clear and for our propensity to do poorly in relationships and our need to recognize and grapple with that very human failing, not to be demoralized or defeated by it, but rather to be challenged by it, challenged to try harder, to work harder, to be better kids, better parents, better spouses, better siblings, and better friends. Of course, we fail in other endeavors as well. There are literally thousands of stories of famous failures. Leon Uris, internationally renowned writer, the author of Exodus and many other best-selling novels, he failed high school English 3 times. Another failure of note, Thomas Edison, perhaps the greatest inventor in history. But his genius was not always recognized. His grade school teachers in Port Huron, Michigan, complained that he was too slow a learner, too hard to handle. At their urging, his mother took him out of school and homeschooled him. He pursued his love of science on his own, resulting in more than 1,300 inventions. But his inventions didn't come easily. The light bulb took more than 2,000 attempts until it worked. A reporter asked him how it felt to fail so many times before ultimately succeeding, and he answered, "I look at it differently. I never failed once. I invented the light bulb. It happened to be a 2,000-step process." And today, many, if not most parents, at one level or another, deal with learning challenges their kids face. We now recognize children who in previous generations were considered slow or behavioral problems to have slight or not so slight disabilities that make it difficult for them to learn or function in usual ways. Initials such as ADD, attention deficit disorder, ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, are becoming part of parental vocabulary. But new labels on their own don't make the world a better place. But innovative educators and medical professionals in their strategies in dealing with kids who have learning and social challenges can offer us a valuable insight. True, medication covers some of the issues sometimes, but the most interesting approach is the teaching of new skills that enable the challenged kid to succeed, notwithstanding the difficulties that can't easily be cured. Skills and strategies to overcome challenge can help kids and adults with a whole variety of limitations. In a way, that's exactly what Torah does for the Jewish people, who, like all people, have limitations, areas of weakness, tendencies to err. What Torah does for us is to teach us skills and strategies to overcome the limitations of being human. We don't refer to them as skills and strategies, we tend to call them mitzvot. But that, in a way, is what they are. And those skills and strategies that make up our tradition go a long way to readying us for the complexities and challenges that life undoubtedly has in store for each and every one of us. There's no shame in having human limitations. Even the most skilled amongst us, the most talented among us, the most successful among us has personal failure stories. Their genius may be, in each case, found in their ability to transform failure into the bedrock of success. One final story, the Talmud tells us a beautiful story of a Rav Preda and his student. The student, one might say, was slow to learn. As the text described, he had to teach him everything 400 times before his student would understand. But one particular day, 400 times was not enough. The poor student couldn't grasp the lesson. That day he was distracted. So what does Rabbi Preda do? He went over the lesson another 400 times. After which we assume the text doesn't tell us that the student finally understood. The story ends with God himself rewarding Rav Preda for his patience, for his refusal to give up on a student, for his refusal to reconcile himself to his student being incapable of learning. Even more important and more reason why Rabbi Preda is rewarded by God himself, Rabbi Preda taught his student that one sins when one gives up on him or herself. That whether it takes 2, 10, or even 800 times to succeed, in an important endeavor, we don't give up. Failures along the road to success are not only the normal baggage of human beings, but also easily able to be weathered as long as two conditions are met. What are those conditions? One, that we refuse to give up, that we keep plugging away, not allowing failure or setback to deplete our reservoir of spirit. Two, that one values decency and the feelings of others above any material, academic, or personal success. From where I see it, a mensch is always a success. The Hasidic master of the late 18th, early 19th century, Rav Simcha Bunim, taught that one should carry two notes in his pockets. One note should read, Bishvili nivra ha'olam, the world was created for my sake. And the second note should read, Anochi afar va'efer, I am dust and ashes. We understand the Rebbe's point. When one's spirits are low and life seems especially difficult, reaching into one's pocket and pulling out the note proclaiming the world to have been created especially for him or her would offer a measure of encouragement and hope. When one would become overly impressed with him or herself, the other pocket's note, reminding her of very humble origins, would quickly deflate excessive pride. True in comparison to God, we are dust and ashes, but we're also something that even God cannot aspire to be. We're human. In Yiddish, human translates as mensch. But what we know, there's a huge discrepancy separating the English and the Yiddish in this case. Our tradition teaches us to bridge that gap, to strive for decency in our relationships, integrity in our daily dealings. For it is as mention, as decent, striving humans, that our failures lead to successes, that our seeming insignificance as mortal beings can be elevated to levels of stunning beauty.